Hello and welcome to Rippercast, your podcast on Jack the Ripper and the Whitechapel murders, as we bring to you recordings from the audio archives. This is the second of 8 instalments in chronological order, spanning the years 1995 through to 1999, and all focusing on the Maybrick Diary. The main purpose of these releases is to save and preserve, by sharing in digital format, Ripper-related recordings originally made on cassette, that over the many years are now quickly deteriorating. The following sound recording we bring you is Mike Barrett on BBC Radio Merseyside, which aired on the 13th and 20th of September 1995.
Now for the Azurdia interview. Here's Bob Azurdia. Hello again, Bob Azurdia here. And just 2 weeks ago, Stuart Evans and Paul Graney appeared on this programme with startling new evidence about the identity of the legendary Jack the Ripper. Stuart and Paul maintained that the mass murderer who stalked the streets of Victorian London was actually an American herb doctor, a quack, who was, at one time, arrested on lesser charges than murder, only to jump bail and abscond back to America. Their evidence is based on newly discovered letters written by the one-time head of the CID, Chief Inspector John Littlechild, who named Francis Tumblety as the Ripper. Well, all this brings the total of so-called Ripper suspects into double figures, though the evidence is impressive in this case, and of course it's the latest available. It also dismisses the claims of the so-called Ripper Diaries, which were published 2 years ago, and which purported to be the diaries of James Maybrick, himself the alleged victim of murder by his wife Florence in 1889 in Liverpool, the year after the Ripper murders ceased. Stuart and Paul claim that these diaries, which caused a sensation when they were published, have now been admitted to be a hoax by Michael Barrett, the one-time scrap metal dealer who owns the diaries and claims that they were given to him by a man named Tony Devereux, who died. Well, no sooner had the Evans-Graney programme been broadcast than I received a letter from Mr. Barrett in which he says categorically that the diaries are not a hoax and that he has not signed a sworn affidavit admitting that they were. He joins me now to put the record as straight as possible and to maintain the confusion, I fancy, as to just who really was Jack the Ripper and just who wrote the famous diaries. James Maybrick, possibly, alias Jack the Ripper, or maybe somebody else years later. Mike Barrett, first, whatever the truth, whether or not the diaries are genuine, you personally believe yourself to be the Ripper's latest victim, together with most of those who've been involved with them. Can you explain?
Oh. Well, first of all, I know it's only a half hour, but if you had several hours, I don't even think that would be sufficient. What happened to me? Well, I was divorced due to the pressure. It's a very, very long story, indeed, but nevertheless, I come directly to the Ripper booth. I believe, and I sincerely believe, that it's got an omen about it. I can go into that a great deal later, because everybody's touched. It seems something's happened to them. For instance, I'll just give you a couple of examples. Doreen Montgomery had a partner, very nice fellow, for years. She just recently died of cancer. The chap who had the watch just was literally run over 2 weeks ago.
The chap who had the watch. This is the watch which was found in a shop in Rome.
That's quite correct, yes. Has died in a motorcycle accident in Spain.
And where is this watch now?
Actually, I don't know. That's with the Johnson. Well, obviously Albert Johnson, probably with his brother. I don't know. I don't
found it originally. Albert Johnson.
Yeah, I'm presuming, because I don't keep in contact with them.
But you believe that should be readily accessible?
Yes. I've been attacked very viciously within the press. Very viciously within the press.
You have?
Yes. Oh, yes. No question about that.
Why have you been attacked?
Well, when somebody comes along and actually sincerely believes that the diary is actually genuine, I mean, it creates worldwide interest, obviously. People want to know everything. This, the other. You know, even to my own private life. Now, I've actually, and it's well on record, it's in a paperback, I've actually had obscene phone calls, I've actually had phone calls in the middle of the night. I've actually had threats. I've actually had one death threat, which has been logged with Walton Lane Police Station. That is factual. Right. This is to the extent of what the diary has caused.
I don't want to dwell particularly on your private life, but you mentioned it yourself, and the very first things you said were that you have been divorced since all this came about. You really believe that came about as a result of the pressure?
Yeah, well, we were married for 19 years. We're going along quite amicably. You know, I mean, far from rich. My wife was as a secretary. I was, on invalidity with kidney failure. I'm going along quite amicably. Then Tony Deborah gives me this diary, and then everything changed. Just everything literally went downhill from there onwards. I was, to be perfectly honest, to say a madman possessed would be, I don't know, an understatement, because the diary literally took over my life. I mean, it did take over my life.
But you had other problems, I think, as well, didn't you?
In regards...
Well, for example, didn't you...
Oh, the drink. Oh, yes, I become an alcoholic. Oh, there's no question about that. In the end, it just goes... The pressure was so much, and I do honestly mean the pressure was so much. Constant harassment over the diary. I mean, I've been interviewed virtually all over the world. 60 Minutes in America. This is something you've got to think of. An ordinary person is taken literally from a terrace house and thrown into the media spotlight.
So you would like to put the clock back then?
Oh, I'd definitely like to put the clock back. If I could turn the clock back, no question about it.
What about the financial aspect of it? Have you not made any money out of it?
No, because we've been fending this off legally. That we had to fend off the Times, for instance. The Times, now they come and interviewed me, and they asked an awful lot of questions, and I categorically denied that the diary, I wrote the diary, because this is one of the suppositions that people have been made. Now, I think one of the reasons that they made these suppositions is that for a brief period of time, about 7 or 8 years ago, I was writing short stories and interviewing various celebrities. In actual fact, Mr. Azurdia, if you recollect, you've actually been into my house. Going back 7 years ago.
Indeed.
And the type of people I was interviewing, such as Kenneth Williams, Stan Boardman, Mick Miller, some quite famous celebrities at that particular time, Bernard Manning, etc. And I was working or freelancing for a magazine called Celebrity Magazine. Now, because I had, shall we say, a moderate success within writing, people have automatically presumed and picked up on that fact, and automatically presumed, well, if he's had a moderate success in writing and had moderate success in interviewing people, 2 and 2 make 5. Well, this is the conclusion an awful lot of people jump to.
Yes, but the great difficulty with regard to your diary is there is simply no provenance other than your word.
Yes, agreed. Now, this is the biggest problem. Now, no provenance to the diary. Regretfully, I had to make a stand, and everybody was badgering me for provenance over a period of 2 years. This is before I really went and hit the bottle. This is before. I always had my occasional pints. I'll be the first person to admit that I've always had a pint all my life. Right, now having said that, over a period of 2 years, I was badgered constantly, to the point you couldn't even go out, where people were saying, what about this diary, Mike? What about this diary? It was the diary 7 days a week, 24 hours a day, constantly. It intruded on my personal life. Now, even, quite honestly, the Daily Post went along and even intruded Caroline School, that's my daughter at the time, to find out where Caroline was in order to get to myself, in order to find out where I lived. Now, that is factual. That is actually factual.
Was this because they simply didn't know where you lived, or hadn't made any contact?
I hadn't made no contact whatsoever.
Are you suggesting that their behaviour was improper?
To a degree. I know. You can't suggest that their behaviour is improper. I can understand this on a writer's point of view or a journalist's point of view, that it's a big news story.
Right.
So I'm not saying it's improper, but what I'm saying is that when it begins to intrude in your personal life, where do you start contacting the headmistress, Mrs. Melia, at the time, to find out where your daughter is? And the reason he got onto that, Caroline, my daughter at the time, was featured in the Daily Post and Echo, and in the Echo, for playing the last trumpet, the last post by the British Legion, being the first young child to play that. And I happened to mention this to a person on the train coming back from London, and this is 1 and 1 made 2, they come to 5, and then they put it this way, they found me through Caroline.
It seems a reasonable way to find you.
And that's how they found me. Now, I found that, to a certain degree, was an intrusion on my privacy.
Well, they wanted to find you, and they wanted, no doubt, to ask you questions politely and properly, and I'm sure they did they not?
Oh, yes.
Right.
I mean, I'm not suggesting anything was improper.
No.
I'm just saying that this is where it all sort of begins, where your private life no longer becomes your private life.
All right, but nonetheless, you went on and had the book published.
Yes.
So that to an extent you courted publicity.
No, I don't think I actually did want to
but you must appreciate.
No,
if you're going to publish a book of this sort,
yeah, I do.
You're not going to be left alone.
You used the word court publicity. No,
Yes.
actually, I didn't call
You didn't
publicity.
seek it?
No, I didn't seek it, because Doreen Montgomery, the first time I met her, Doreen Montgomery is my agent. First time I met her, and she brought Shirley Harrison, I said, well, fine.
Shirley Harrison is the woman who actually wrote the book.
Book around the diary and what have you. And obviously I've done a tremendous amount with the research with her. I mean, but she actually wrote the actual contents of the book. Now, Shirley Harrison, we're diversifying. We're going back to Doreen Montgomery. Going back to the first time I met her, I said, I don't really wish to be famous. I don't want to become famous, you know. Little did I know at that particular time, I was actually producing what I call today Frankenstein's monster. That's what I call the diary today, the monster.
Right.
Because it's just totally and utterly got completely out of control.
Yes, well now, within the book itself, there are many references to the tests which took place, the forensic tests which took place on the paper, on the ink, on the handwriting, to indicate that it was at least 90 years old, possibly a little bit more, 100 years
That's
old.
quite correct.
All right. Now, this is fully documented in the book, and Shirley Harrison, the author, comments on all these things. Now, subsequently, one hears that there is further evidence that the ink is much newer and contains an ingredient which wasn't available until about 1974.
Right. Now, having said that, you have to appreciate I'm going back to Shirley Harrison's research, my own research, Robert Smith's research, and the various people that have been
Robert
involved,
Smith being
the publisher, and the various other people that have been involved within the diary. The research going through, we've tried to act completely above board. We've got some of the most eminent ink specialists within the world, and to get their opinion. And the ink has gone through micro test, this test, that test, and heaven knows. In actual fact, if you'd like me to quote you some of the ink test, which is actually in the paperback.
Indeed, yes.
Yeah,
yes. Well, there's an extensive list of quotes from so-called experts. I don't use the word so-called.
No, these were experts in their particular field. Now, having said that, the new book that came out, The Lodger, this was totally complete surprise to me. I was informed about it. So, in actual fact, the first time I heard about The Lodger was literally last Monday, when it was advertised on the trailer on Radio Merseyside that the following Wednesday you were producing
talking to Stuart Evans and Paul Gainey.
Hence to say, my
curiosity
we're here. Yes, was aroused, and that's why I'm here now. Now, in the book, The Lodger, it does say, now I have yet to see that research material. I have yet to see what they have, those particular authors, what they have, where their documents are. As far as we're concerned, we have produced our documents within the book.
No, within the book too. They have reproduced the letter giving the name of this man.
The letter, yes.
The letter.
Remember, we're on the subject of the ink, not the letter.
Indeed, yes. Indeed, but we're not talking about the same thing at all now. Then we were talking about the ink in your diaries, and you are now turning the conversation to the documentation within the book of the Ripper.
What I was saying, I was surprised at the contents with in the Lodger. It does state categorically regarding the ink.
Regarding your ink?
Regarding the ink,
yes.
Now, I have yet, this is the point I'm making, I have yet to go back and to find any document proof to that. I'm quite willing to have an open mind, very open mind, if I could see that document evidence.
Mike, let me ask you, is the diary of the Ripper a genuine diary?
Now, that is a question that I've been asked 1,000, a million times, to the point where, as I say, I literally cracked up in the end. I just gave up and said, oh, to hell with it. Sorry, I do apologise for that slip up with that one word. In the words of, shall we say, Rhett Butler, you know, damn us all. Well, that's not the exact quote. But having said that, I got to the point where I was badgered. And this question is constantly asking, is the diary genuine? I have always maintained that the diary, in my belief, is genuine. I sincerely believe it. The evidence is there. There's too much evidence. The evidence is overwhelming. However, I cannot, and I still cannot, to this very day, and I don't think until the day I die, and I don't think in 200, 300 years anyone ever will be able to prove provenance of the diary. Unfortunately, I cannot prove provenance of the diary. Yet everybody wishes me to prove provenance, and I keep maintaining, how can I prove provenance?
With great difficulty. Well,
in fact, it's impossible.
Obviously. Very, very difficult. Then why did you admit that it was a hoax?
Ah, right. As I say, I had 2 years of constant being attacked. You know, people, pressure. I mean, phone calls in the middle of the night. I know I'm repeating myself, but this is all factual. Threats, everything. My own private life just completely and utterly disintegrated, to the point where I didn't have a private life in the end, to the point where the diary literally got on top of me. And I went up and I got myself a bottle of scotch, quite honestly and truly. right? And I drank the whole damn bottle of scotch. And then after that bottle of scotch went, I went up and staggered up the next morning and drank another bottle of scotch. 2 bottles of scotch within a period of 48 hours. I didn't know if I was coming, going, backwards or forwards. So much so, and it's well recorded because it's in the paperback book, I ended up in an alcohol crash. Now, I regret that. It was a very stupid thing to do.
Are you better now?
Oh, yes, completely. Well, having said that, one has to remember, people handle pressure in different types of form. You know, my type of form, to where I handle pressure, stress, I ended up taking to the bottle.
Right.
And believe me, drinking 2 bottles of scotch within a period of 48 hours, considering I'm still on renal failure as well, is not a very sensible thing to do. And I didn't know who I was coming and going and what statements I made at that time. I just don't remember.
But didn't you volunteer the information to the Daily Post that it was a hoax? And
then I was absolutely totally drunk.
You were totally drunk.
And the journalist, Mr. Harold Brough, will confirm, because it states in the paperback book, that he come to the house and there was 2 bottles of scotch next to the settee that I was sitting in. In actual fact, it's written in the diary.
Yes.
Well, what's the point of denying alcoholism when it's actually written in the paperback edition?
We're not discussing your alcoholism as such, which you admit to. I'm wondering why you found it necessary to volunteer information to Harold Brough, for example, to say, look, this is a hoax.
Once again,
this is where I got the documentation. This is where I got the diary.
I got to the point where I just wanted to destroy the diary.
You wanted to destroy
the diary.
You wanted to get it off your back.
I wanted to get it off my back. The diary was destroying my life.
Even to the extent of now lying about it and signing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh, we're totally... Look, I was a happy, easy-going man. All right. Very happy, very content. Responsible for my daughter taking to school. I was really happy and content. Then this diary comes into my life. It changes my life completely. It puts my world in a complete... It puts me in another world I didn't know existed.
So you feel, or you felt at the time, that the denial at this stage would take the pressure off you?
Yeah, I thought, take all the pressure off me and to hell with it. Did it? Yeah. No, it didn't. It had the exact opposite effect.
Because
it did have the exact opposite effect.
Did you not subsequently, though, sign a denial in a solicitor's office?
Oh, I signed a denial in a solicitor's office, yeah. When I was 100% sober, because I said to her, I wasn't even controlling my senses when I made that statement.
Well, why did you do that?
I made a denial that I didn't write the diary. That's what I'm saying.
You wrote a denial that you didn't write the diary?
Yes.
But was it not also a denial that it was a genuine diary?
Oh, no, it was a denial that I didn't write the diary. No, I always believed the diary was genuine. You know, what I wrote a denial. This word's denial is confused, but I wrote a denial that I wasn't in control of my senses at that particular time. You know, I mean...
So that was a denial of the denial, in other words?
Yeah, denial of the denial. In other words, you know, I got fed up. I made a stupid statement when I was absolutely, totally and utterly drunk. You know, and then I thought, right, when I sobered up, I thought, my God, that statement's a total lie. So I had to deny that statement.
Because my understanding was...
This is where all the misconceptions has happened.
My understanding was that you made a sworn statement saying that you were not the perpetrator of the diary. In other words, that you didn't write it yourself.
Yeah, of course, yes. Well, I've made that statement because I didn't.
That it was not genuine.
Oh, no. I have made a statement saying I did not write the diary. I've made a definite statement that I did not write the diary. You know, but I've definitely not made a statement. And categorically denied that one. And that is factual because it's logged with my solicitors. That is factual. That's there to say that I did. You know, I didn't, under no circumstances, stay for my solicitors, Mr. Richard Barker Jones, who's been more than helpful. In fact, I couldn't thank that man enough. He's been very, very supportive, you know, throughout the whole thing, because he knows the type of pressure I've actually have been under. He is the one person that does know the pressure I've been under.
Did you not indicate at a certain time that you actually got the documents, the diary, from Outhwaite and Litherland, a well-known firm of antiquarians?
That was the night I was totally drunk, and that was the night that Harold Brough took me around in his car, and I think I had a bottle of scotch in my hand then. And if you can always check with Harold.
You remember that?
Oh, I think I had a bottle of scotch.
But I mean, you remember pointing out and saying that's where I
remember going all over Liverpool at the time. I don't remember half the play places I went to.
And pointing out the Blue Coat School, saying that's where I got the ink.
Yeah, since I've been back to the Blue Coat School, and I volunteered. I went up there when once I got sobered up completely. I said, do you remember me? Do you know me? Have you ever seen me? This is the managers, or the owners, or the staff, and they all say, no, we've never seen you. We don't know you, and what have you. I said, well, thank you very much. It was the only way I could prove that. I was totally drunk at the time. But you've got to understand why I did get drunk. I had had enough of this.
I can well understand.
I have well and truly had enough of it.
I can well understand why you got drunk. Yes, I can't, however, quite understand, because my approach to things is not the same as yours, and yours is not the same as other people.
Once again, different people.
I can't understand why you found it necessary, though, to tell lies, and elaborate lies, very elaborate. That's where I got it from, that's where I got the ink from, and then actually go and sign away.
Yeah, that's where I was.
Sort of released it, didn't actually find it.
No, it actually backfired on me completely.
All right, let's go back to the beginning, if we may, Mike. I am not questioning your personal integrity. I'm just trying to clarify, because it seemed right at the beginning there were...
Now, this is the whole point. I know you're not. I appreciate that, but there's an awful lot of people that have tried. And this is one of the things that has really annoyed me, really become very frustrating, very annoying. And when you constantly have to defend yourself, day in, day out, 7 days a week. Now, for instance, in the paperback book, Shirley Harrison has wrote that I was, in an alcoholic clinic. Now, I've had to come to terms with that because it's written in the paperback book. Now, having said that, people automatically be saying, Michael Barrett is still an alcoholic. But I'm not drinking.
Well, you may not be drinking, but you know as well as I do that once an alcoholic, you only need one more and you can go back again.
There's different parts of schoolings in that particular course. There's different parts of schoolings in that particular course. I mean, I know because I've been in an alcoholic clinic, so there are different schools of thought, having said that. No, the point is, no, I've come back from the brink, shall we say. I've literally come back from the brink. I thought, drink, I found a way out to forget all this aggravation, to forget all this onslaught. And I think that was a very appropriate onslaught directly towards me. Drink, I found a way out. In the end, I found out that drink was no solution. And that's the whole point. There's no solution. So you might as well stand up, face the world, and come out and say, right, once again, I am an alcoholic and probably be an alcoholic for the rest of my life. In that case, you labelled it. But the point is you're not drinking, which is a heck of a big difference. That is a heck of a big difference. And why should you be an alcoholic if it's only for a short period of time? Why should you be labelled for the rest of your life with that title? That's my point.
You've always maintained that you obtained these diaries from a man called Tony Deverell.
Quite correct.
What sort of a person was he?
Tony, describe him. Right, now, Tony was a print worker working on the Liverpool Retired. He was what I call an ordinary man in the street, the ordinary man in the street. A chap to have a pint with. We got on exceedingly well. Good conversationist, very good conversationist.
Quite a bit older than you, I would have thought.
Yes, he was 60, well, not at the time, he was 57, I think, when I met him. He was 61 when he died, so it was about a 4-year period. Don't quote me on that because I'm not exactly sure. I think it was about 61, yeah, approximately. So what type of man? I don't know. He was just a nice man to talk to. He was a decent man.
Honest man?
Well, I always found him an honest man. Yeah,
a con man?
Yeah. No. If you're going to say, did he have the capability of writing a diary, don't worry, I've been asked that question 1,000 times.
Well, you're going to be asked again.
No, I'm not trying to...
Did he have the capability?
No, I'm not trying to be derogatory to Tony, not in the slightest whatsoever. I don't think he had the personal capability. He was what I call an average working man that just went to work, originally in the past, before he retired.
Because he died so soon that he couldn't be questioned.
Yeah, unfortunately, he couldn't be questioned. I did question him quite several times. I did pester him, badger him, in actual fact. I could say badger him.
And why wouldn't he tell you where he got it?
I don't know. I think eventually he would have told me. I mean, nobody anticipates he's going to die of a heart attack several weeks later. Less than a few weeks later. I mean, I didn't even anticipate. I knew he was a sick man.
He had no family?
Oh, yes, he had sisters, the daughters and what have you. They were very good to him.
And why did he give this to you then?
Exactly. That's a good point. I used to go down and see him every day. I used to go and run around a betting shop. He fractured his hip, just for the record. This was the Christmas previous, he fractured his hip. So, and I used to collect Caroline from school, which is in Fountains Row, and used to literally pass Tony's house every day. And previous to that, we always met in the Saddle Pub, and we always drank in the Saddle Pub. Then he fractured his hip. Once he fractured his hip, I was still going down to collect Caroline, hence I was still passing his house. It was literally past the school. I used to always call in, does he want to put a bet on? Stanley racing back. You should be interested in that. Or he used to phone me up and say, hey Mike, will you go and get me something, from the shop, whatever the case may be. Could have been sugar, it could have been, so I just popped in and
the odd thing, yeah.
The odd thing and everything. And then while I was there, we had a chat and we had a talk and everything. And we were having the same chats and talks over any discussion as if we were in a pub. Meaning previously when we were in the Saddle Pub,
Yes, comfortable conversation.
So it's just a normal routine. Only instead of being in the pub, I was actually in Tony's house.
But you have the capability to have written a diary like this.
People saying I have the capability.
I mean, you wrote short stories.
Oh yes,
you've been telling us.
Thank you very much for the compliment. Yeah, I think the guy who plays. Well, I look at it this way then. If I have the capability to write the diary, first of all, I have to be an ink expert. Now, first of all, you're saying I have to be a professional writer. I have to be a very, very good professional writer.
Not necessarily, but you have to have a good mind of a particular sort.
Right. Well, I have to be a historian.
You have to know something about
not just
the 1880s
not
and
just
something
I
about
have to know
criminology at the time.
Criminology at the time. So therefore I have to be a historian, a very precise historian. I would have to know 2 murders completely. That's the Maybrick,
very much so.
and the Ripper. Right.
There are plenty of books, though, available to read up on these.
That's a tremendous amount of knowledge. And then, yes, again, having said that, go back to the Ripper books. There's so many contradictions within the Ripper books. So the forger is going to make a mistake. He could easily make one mistake from one Ripper book to another Ripper book. I mean, the Duke of Clarence, there's one. Sept Knights, there's another. Melvin Harris. There's so many different contradictions. I mean, I can go through the diary, the farthings, the pennies and everything. So easy to make a mistake. But yet the diary had it correct right the way through.
Well, perhaps it had correct.
Well, that forger,
in a way, you are extremely knowledgeable by the quotations you've been, or the quotes you've been giving to me in the last few moments, even the various aspects of history, and you could very well have had all that information 5 years ago, 6 years ago, as opposed to now.
In order to do that, I would have to be a metal expert as well. Now, having said that, I would have to be a metal expert.
Well, you've been in scrap metal.
Yeah, but I think being in a scrap metal game and being a real metal expert is 2 different things, and particularly when the watch has actually gone through university and it's been passed within that time, and it has actually been proven.
This is something different now. This watch you're referring to, Mike, because the watch was a watch which was found in a shop, I think in Liskeard in Wallasey, and it had on it faintly inscribed initials of all the alleged victims of the Ripper, plus, allegedly, the initials of James Maybrick himself. And this was discovered at much the same time as your book was being published.
Well, actually, it came out of the blue, but it wasn't discovered much at the same time. We must have a correction there. It was discovered approximately 18 months later. Right, at that time. So it's
later in your publication?
Later in the publication.
Well, it was referred to, although in your first edition, surely?
Well, it was referred to in the first edition, I'm not quite sure. Yes, I know, but the first edition was over 12 months research previous to that, before the first edition, if you have to remember.
Well,
it cropped up
approximately the same time as your book.
I have always kept myself distance from the watch, which I'll come to, later. But first of all, the watch was brought by the Johnson brothers from Stewart's the jewellers.
Yes.
Now, we went back, Shirley Harrison went back to trace the history. And Susanna, that's Susanna Stewart, told they got all the appropriate documents, the receipts and everything else, and the watch's history. Susanna's father had given them the watch, along with several other gold stocks and antique jewellery from their shop in Lancaster.
Yeah, from Lancaster?
From Lancaster, when he retired. And that was at least 8 years before the watch was actually in the Wirral shop.
So Mr. Stewart maintained that they had had it in their possession, this watch, for at least 8 years.
For at least 8 years. She also goes on, I said probably as much as 15 years ago previously, she also goes on that. So the
suggestion is that if you were in cahoots with them, you'd have to lay your hands on trail 15 years in advance.
Previous to that, yes, right. Now, I've always kept myself distant from the watch, and I thought it was a very sensible thing to do, because I always thought at the time, I had the diary, which I sincerely believe genuine. I didn't know what was going to crop up. I always anticipated, and something might crop up. Somebody might be getting onto the bandwagon once you find out that the diary was published and everything else. When I heard about the watch, totally out of the blue, in fact, when the publisher heard about the watch, and with Shirley Harrison, everybody was very, very alarmed. We were all, shall we say, on pins. So our immediate reaction is, we must get the watch tested, and we must trace the watch's history. Now, we duly did trace the watch's history, which we can go back. So that's
by the jewellers,
by the receipts, everything else. So
and the claim is that it was Maybrick's watch.
Watch, yes. Now, having said that, we went and we took the watch. Well, I didn't actually personally, because I've kept myself distant from the watch. Shirley Harrison took the watch, and she got it tested at the university by one of the top metal
in Manchester.
In Manchester. And he dated this approximately 10 to 10 years either way. So how do you go about that? Apparently with the brass, the corrosion and the scratches and the marks that's been grind over the brass, it's impossible. Any new markings, any new scratchings would have obviously showed up under the appropriate metal tests at that particular time, which he did not do.
And the man who actually found the watch, you say, was actually killed only 2 weeks ago?
Approximately two and a half weeks ago. This is saying the diary has been literally cursed. I mean, there's so many... It's touched everybody that has been involved on the professional side of the diary. It's touched our lives in so many different ways.
Mike Barrett owner of the so-called Jack the Ripper, James Maybrick Diaries, and next time the mystery deepens as Mike Barrett seeks to explain further signed statements he's made while still insisting the diaries are genuine. Till next time, this is Bob Azurdia saying cheerio, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye now.
Bob Azurdia was talking to Mike Barrett, the owner of the so-called Jack the Ripper, James Maybrick Diaries. And you can hear the conversation continued at 6:30 next Wednesday evening. Time now for the Azurdia interview. Here's Bob Azurdia.
Hello again, Bob Azurdia here, and Mike Barrett, the man who 2 years ago produced what he claims is the diary of Jack the Ripper, alias James Maybrick, a Victorian murder victim, has been attempting to maintain that his claims are still valid and that the diary really is genuine. He's been moved to protest following a programme in this slot with Stuart Evans and Paul Graney, who in turn have produced a new book called The Lodger, in which they claim that new evidence proves the Ripper was actually an American crack doctor named Frank Tumblety, who had relatives living in Widnes, and who escaped the police when he jumped bail, having been charged with a lesser offence than murder. They say that Mike Barrett is discredited, and that he signed a sworn affidavit to the effect that the Ripper diary is a hoax. Mike Barrett, in turn, says the Ripper diaries have ruined his life, causing his divorce and alcoholism, and affecting adversely everyone who's been involved with the diaries professionally. Mike, you still, however, state categorically that the diary you possess is genuine.
As far as I know, yes. You know, the point is, you see, going back to the original, when I cracked, I had 2 years people asking me province. And when you haven't got the answer, and when you're getting the same question asked virtually 7 days a week, what do? You just, in the end, you just give up. I felt like carrying the tape round and just putting the tape on when anybody asked me and said, yeah, there's my answer.
But you haven't helped yourself at all by denying and
signing
denials.
Yeah, I admit I haven't helped myself at all because I absolutely got fed up and totally fed up with the diary. I am sick to the diary. Even today, I mean, I'm in the studio now. It's the diary. It's the diary. It's 7 days a week.
Well, it didn't have to be. You could very well have walked completely away from it,
yes,
because with great respect, you volunteered to come to this studio today. You didn't need it.
I volunteered for one reason, and one reason alone, after listening to your interview last Wednesday. And when I read that I had made a statement, an affidavit, stating in the book, The Lodger,